The morning began like any other. Calm, bright, and deceptively ordinary. But I already knew, deep in my bones, that nothing about today would remain ordinary. Today was Vivian's wedding, the culmination of months, no years, of planning, sacrifice, and endless care. Thomas and I had poured our lives, our savings, and our hearts into orchestrating what was supposed to be her dream day. And yet, as I sat in the quiet lounge of the grand estate, I felt a familiar cold tightening in my chest. I brushed a loose strand of hair from my face and glanced at Thomas. He looked equally tense, adjusting his cuff repeatedly, as though fidgeting could smooth out the tension surrounding us. He tried to smile at me, that subtle reassurance we'd shared countless times over decades of parenting, but it faltered instantly. There was no denying it. We were outsiders here. Do you think she even knows we're here? Thomas asked, his voice low, barely more than a whisper. I shook my head slowly, keeping my eyes on the ornate carpet, patterned in muted golds and silvers. She knows. But she doesn't care, I said. She's focused on them, her guests, her high society circle. They're the ones who matter today, not us. And that thought cut sharper than any blade. We had been invisible for hours, relegated to this lounge, while outside, her carefully curated world spun in elegance. Every floral arrangement, every imported piece of crystal, every delicate brushstroke of perfection, paid for, arranged, and signed off by us, was being paraded without us. The irony was exquisite, bitter, and undeniable. Vivian, my daughter, the little girl I had once held in my arms while she cried over scraped knees and broken dolls, now believed she could erase me with a gesture, a look, a whisper. She thought she could stand above the foundations I had laid and pretend they weren't mine, our sacrifices weren't ours. And today, I would let her discover that perfection, no matter how glittering, was fragile. The first knock came quietly, almost timidly. Miranda, the event coordinator, stepped into the room, clipboard in hand, her expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. Everything is proceeding smoothly, she said. Her voice was polite, yet beneath it, a flicker of unease betrayed the tension she had undoubtedly sensed in the staff. The guests are arriving, and the ceremony will begin soon. The bride. She's very happy. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Thank you, Miranda, I said, my tone calm, composed. That will be all for now. She nodded, retreating quietly, leaving us in silence again. I allowed my gaze to drift toward the window, looking out over the sprawling gardens. Sunlight glinted off the carefully manicured lawns, casting sharp shadows over the white tents, tables arranged with painstaking symmetry, and the fountains that gleamed like liquid diamonds. The beauty of it all was undeniable, but to me, it was hollow. Every element, meticulously designed, was about to become a stage for humiliation. And I couldn't wait to see the cracks begin. Thomas broke the silence again. Do you ever wonder, what went wrong? How did we get here? I sighed, letting my hands rest on my knees. It's not about what went wrong, I said slowly. It's about what she believes went right. She thinks she's proving herself, showing everyone that she can stand above us, that she can create a day that belongs only to her. But she doesn't understand that a day like this, a life like this, it's built on those who care, those who sacrifice, those who quietly hold the pieces together. A subtle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. This time it was a server, hesitant, glancing nervously toward me before speaking. Mrs. Whitmore, sir, everything is ready, but the bride. She's requested that no one interrupt her preparations. Some of the staff, they're unsure how to proceed without authorization. My pulse quickened slightly. I recognized the opportunity immediately. The day she had orchestrated so perfectly was dependent on permissions, oversight, and approvals we had provided. She thought she controlled everything. She did not. Not yet. Thank you, I said calmly. Please ensure that no actions are taken until I give the word. The server nodded, retreating. The quiet tension in the room thickened, palpable, like the moments before a storm breaks. I felt Thomas tense beside me, and I squeezed his hand gently. This is only the beginning, I whispered. She won't realize the truth until it's too late. And I let my eyes close for a moment, imagining the ceremony, the guests, and Vivian herself, radiant and flawless on the surface, but utterly dependent on what we could control. I thought back to the months of planning. Every decision, every payment, Every call and consultation had been made with care, with love. From the imported flowers and custom linens to the elaborate catering, the orchestra, the valet arrangements, and the guest seating charts, every detail had been approved and executed with precision. And yet, she had taken it for granted, assuming she could step into our work and claim it as her own. The faintest shuffle of movement outside signaled the arrival of more guests. I could hear laughter, the soft click of high heels on polished floors, whispers exchanged in polite tones. The world beyond the walls was alive with anticipation, with expectation, with celebration. And here we sat, invisible, sidelined, yet holding the power to unravel it all. I opened my eyes and let my gaze settle on Thomas. "Do you see it?" I asked softly. She doesn't know how fragile her little world really is. One careful move, one strategic pause, and it can all collapse. He swallowed hard, his eyes wide. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" I smiled faintly, the smallest, most private of smiles. "Not yet," I said. "First we watch. We wait. The storm builds slowly, like it should. She must believe she is in control. And then..." A sudden knock at the door made both of us jump. Miranda's voice, clipped and professional, filtered through the slight opening. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sir." "The bride requests your presence. Guests are asking, and she wants to ensure that everything is perfect. She insists that you do not disturb her until the ceremony begins." I let the words sink in. She had orchestrated a day meant to impress, to showcase her brilliance, and to exclude us entirely. She thought she had succeeded. But she had overlooked a critical fact. The people who built her world, the people who paid for it, the people who orchestrated every detail, were still present. Still aware. Still capable. I leaned back in my chair, letting a calm settle over me. This day, which she had designed to dazzle, to impress, to shine, was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. And all she could do was continue her performance, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering just out of sight. Outside, the first notes of ceremony music began to swell. The soft hum of activity, the anticipation of high society, the fragile perfection of the day, it was all in motion. And yet, I knew with certainty that beneath the surface, the foundation was unsteady. I pressed my hands together, feeling the familiar mix of anxiety, anticipation, and controlled power. This was not revenge. This was justice. This was truth. And the moment she realized it, it would be unforgettable. I allowed myself one last glance out the window, taking in the splendor, the light, the perfection, everything that could vanish in a single deliberate moment. And I waited. The air in the lounge felt heavier now, almost suffocating, though the sun streamed in through the tall windows. I could hear faint murmurs from the main hall, the delicate shuffle of shoes across polished floors, and the soft rustle of silk and chiffon as the guests settled into their seats. Every sound reminded me that outside, Vivian's world, her perfect, radiant, untouchable world, was alive and vibrant, while inside, Thomas and I were cast as invisible observers. Thomas leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "It's almost surreal," he said, his voice low. "After everything, all the planning, the payments, the arrangements, she's treating us like we don't exist." I gave a slow, deliberate nod, feeling a mix of anger, disappointment, and restrained satisfaction. "She thinks she can erase us," I said. "She thinks that because she's standing at the center of attention, orchestrating smiles and laughter, she controls the day. But she hasn't considered the one detail she can't command. Authority. The authority behind the beauty, behind the staff, behind every aspect of this day, that's still ours." A soft knock drew our attention. Miranda stepped in again, clutching her clipboard. Her usual composed expression was tempered with a flicker of worry. "Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. The ceremony is about to begin. Guests are seated, and the bride, she's ready for the procession." I gave her a calm, measured look. "Thank you, Miranda. Please remain nearby. I may need updates." Her nod was polite but tense, and she retreated once again. The silence returned, thick and pregnant with anticipation. I could feel Thomas's anxiety mirrored in my own chest. He glanced toward the door, hesitant to speak, yet unable to remain silent. "Do you really think she'll notice if we intervene?" I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. "She will notice eventually," I said. But not until the consequences are undeniable. Patience. Thomas. This isn't about a quick reaction. It's about the moment when the illusion shatters, and she has nowhere to hide. The faint strains of music outside shifted subtly, signaling that the first part of the ceremony was beginning. I could hear the soft patter of footsteps, the carefully rehearsed rustle of fabric, and Vivian's own voice, crisp and confident, directing the pace of the procession. She was radiant, every sequin and shimmer in place, every movement precise. But beneath that flawless exterior, I sensed tension. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but there. The shoulders were just slightly too rigid, the smile a fraction too controlled. She wanted everything perfect, but even she couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. A server appeared at the door, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Whitmore. Sir. Some of the staff, they're unsure how to proceed. The bride wants everything perfect, and the team, they need confirmation on certain details. I allowed a small private smile. The cracks were forming. The illusion of control she clung to was already faltering. Pause everything, I instructed softly. Do not proceed until I give explicit authorization. The server's eyes widened in comprehension and fear. Yes, ma'am, she said, retreating quickly. Thomas exhaled slowly. It's happening, he whispered. Yes, I said softly. And it will continue. She cannot see the foundation she's standing on. Every element, food, drink, flowers, music, is dependent on our approval. Without it, she has nothing. And she doesn't even realize how vulnerable she is. The lounge door opened once more. This time, it was Charles Henley, the venue director. He approached us with his usual professional composure, though I could sense the tension he tried to mask. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully. Everything is in place, but there are questions from the staff. Some are uncertain how to proceed without your confirmation. I met his gaze, letting the weight of authority settle in the room. Then pause everything, I said firmly. No service, no music adjustments, no food, no drinks. Everything stops until I approve it. Charles blinked, as if measuring the implications of my words, then nodded slowly. Understood. The moment he left, I felt a subtle surge of satisfaction. The day that Vivian thought she controlled completely was already beginning to crumble. Every guest, every detail, every moment of perfection depended on permissions we had quietly held all along. And now, for the first time, the consequences of ignoring those who built her world were becoming visible. I turned to Thomas, whose jaw was set tightly, his eyes wide. You see it, don't you? I said. The moment she decided to exclude us, the moment she believed she could stand above the people who created this day, she planted the seeds for this chaos. And now it's growing. Outside, the faint murmur of voices grew. Guests whispered questions, their confusion spreading through the room. Some glanced at the staff, some at each other, and a few, quietly curious, began murmuring about the unexplained pause in service. The orchestra's notes faltered subtly, the rhythm of perfection disrupted. The brilliance of the event, meant to dazzle and impress, was already showing tiny, unsteady cracks. Thomas's hand brushed mine, almost instinctively. Do you think she'll understand? I nodded slowly. She will. Just not yet. She will realize too late that a day like this, a life like this, is built on more than appearances. It requires those who support, who sacrifice, who hold it together behind the scenes. And when she finally sees the truth, I paused, letting the words hang in the thick air. The realization will be unforgettable. The faint shimmer of sunlight glinting off the chandeliers caught my eye. Everything looked perfect from here. Tables arranged symmetrically, flowers in full bloom, champagne glasses sparkling in the light. But perfection is fragile, I reminded myself. And today, that fragility would become evident, quietly but undeniably. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the surge of controlled anticipation. The storm was gathering, small but inevitable, hidden just behind the veil of elegance. Every whispered question, every hesitant glance, every paused step of the staff was a note in the symphony of disruption I was conducting silently, invisibly. And somewhere, beyond the polished floors and sparkling chandeliers, Vivian continued to smile, radiant, flawless, unaware that the carefully built world she had claimed as her own was beginning to falter. This was only the beginning. The soft hum of conversation outside the lounge had grown louder, carrying with it the subtle undertones of confusion and unease. I could hear the clink of silverware being set down, then abruptly paused. The faint shuffle of servers' shoes echoed against the polished floors, each step hesitant, uncertain. Somewhere along the perimeter of the hall, a guest whispered sharply to another, their voice threaded with curiosity and worry. Thomas exhaled audibly beside me. It's real. They're actually noticing something's wrong. I nodded slowly, my fingers lacing together in my lap. Yes, I said softly. The cracks are visible, but she doesn't see them yet. And when she does, it will be too late. A quiet knock drew my attention. Miranda entered, clipboard in hand, her usually precise demeanor fraying at the edges. Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, the bride, she began, her voice low, almost trembling. She's trying to manage things herself now. She's giving instructions directly to the staff, but, she swallowed, glancing at the floor. They're hesitant. They're looking to us for authorization. I allowed a small private smile to tug at the corner of my lips. Exactly as it should be, I said. Do not authorize a single thing. Every element of this day, every flower, every drink, every dish, depends on our approval. And until I say otherwise, it will remain at a standstill. Miranda's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them. Yes, ma'am. She retreated without another word. Thomas shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe this. All these years, she's always been untouchable. Perfect. Now, she's floundering. She's learning, I said, my voice calm, steady. And that lesson, it will last a lifetime. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a server hesitating near the head table. She held a tray with champagne flutes, frozen mid-step, glancing toward the corridor where the events coordinators usually hovered. One of the younger servers whispered something hurriedly to her colleague, and the confusion rippled like a small wave across the staff. The orchestra's gentle music faltered ever so slightly, the once fluid notes now punctuated by brief pauses. Guests noticed, murmuring to one another, some smiling awkwardly, others exchanging uneasy glances. A subtle tension had begun to thread through the room, barely perceptible yet undeniable. The illusion of perfection was fraying. I leaned toward Thomas, lowering my voice. Do you see it? The moment she thought she was untouchable, the moment she believed she could exclude us entirely, it planted the seed of chaos. And now it's growing. He swallowed hard, his eyes wide. It's almost beautiful in a way. I allowed myself a small smile, tempered with something sharper, more precise. Yes, but it's more than that. It's justice. Every guest here, every server, every musician, they rely on the foundation we built. And today, that reliance is showing them the truth of her arrogance. Another knock at the lounge door heralded the arrival of Charles Henley, the venue director. His composed exterior was cracking, just slightly, betraying the tension he tried to mask. Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, he began carefully. The staff, they're at a standstill. They've stopped serving, waiting for instructions. The bride. She's becoming anxious. Guests are asking questions. Some are openly wondering what's happening. I met his gaze steadily. Then keep it that way. No service, no adjustments, no deliveries. Do not authorize anything. Let the tension build naturally. His eyes reflected the gravity of my words. Yes. Understood, ma'am. As he left, I felt a subtle, controlled satisfaction wash over me. Every perfectly orchestrated detail of this day, every flower, every glass, every note of music, was balanced on the edge of obedience and authority. And now, by quietly withdrawing it, the delicate perfection Vivian had relied upon was beginning to crumble. From the corridor outside, I could hear the faint crackle of voices, some whispering, others muttering in confusion. The guests were noticing small inconsistencies, pauses where movement should have been smooth, empty tables that should have held appetizers, servers standing idle as though frozen in place. Their discomfort was subtle but growing, a ripple that would soon become a wave. Thomas's hand brushed mine. She has no idea, he whispered. She really has no idea. I nodded. No idea at all. And that's exactly how it should be. She'll try to reclaim control, of course, but every second she hesitates, every moment she doubts, it strengthens the lesson. Today is about truth, not appearances. Outside, the faint strains of Vivian's voice echoed, tight and controlled. She was directing the staff herself, waving hands, giving instructions, but her authority had been quietly stripped away. The staff moved, yes, but tentatively, unsure, constrained by the instructions I had issued moments ago. The facade she had built, radiant and flawless, was beginning to fracture in plain sight. I allowed my eyes to wander around the room. The chandeliers sparkled, the flower arrangements gleamed, the tables were set immaculately, but all of it was now suspended over a thread of uncertainty. Every guest, every element, every moment of perfection was subject to the invisible hand that held all power quietly in our hands. Thomas let out a soft, incredulous laugh. It's like watching a perfectly balanced vase start to tip. Yes, I said softly, feeling a quiet surge of satisfaction. And soon, it will shatter. Through the slight opening in the door, I glimpsed a few of the guests exchanging awkward looks, their polite smiles faltering. Some whispered to each other, some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the musicians hesitated, uncertain, their eyes flicking toward the staff for guidance. Every note, every movement, every gesture depended on authority. And the authority had been quietly withdrawn. The soft flutter of my heartbeat matched the growing tension outside. I felt a mixture of anticipation, controlled satisfaction, and a faint tremor of excitement. The day that Vivian had believed she commanded entirely was already showing signs of vulnerability. She had tried to erase us, to stand above the people who built her world, and now, she was about to discover that the world could crumble without the invisible hands that supported it. And she would see it. She would feel it. She would understand, too late, that perfection is fragile. And that sometimes, the people you try to erase hold the power to define the final act. I leaned back, letting the sound of uncertainty outside fill my ears. This was only the beginning, the first wave of chaos in a day that she had thought would belong entirely to her. Every whispered question, every hesitant step, every pause of service was a note in the symphony of disruption I was orchestrating quietly, invisibly. Outside, Vivian continued to smile, radiant and flawless, unaware that the first cracks in her carefully built world had already appeared. The tension was mounting, and by the end of this day, she would understand the consequences of underestimating those who quietly held everything together. And I would be there to witness it all. The soft murmur of confusion from the main hall had grown into audible tension. Footsteps faltered, servers hesitated, and the once seamless rhythm of the event began to stutter. I could hear whispered questions from the guests, polite at first, but edged with curiosity and unease. Some of the older attendees exchanged knowing glances, their eyebrows lifting subtly as they noticed the small, inexplicable pauses in service. Thomas shifted beside me, his hand brushing mine briefly. "It's really happening," he said, a mixture of disbelief and excitement in his voice. "I've never seen her like this before." I allowed a slow, controlled smile to form. She thinks she controls everything. But perfection depends on those who are invisible. Today, she is about to learn that lesson the hard way. Miranda entered the lounge again, her clipboard pressed tightly to her chest, lips pressed in a thin line. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sir." "The staff, they're frozen. The servers are waiting for instructions. Guests are asking questions. The bride is." She's trying to maintain composure, but, her voice faltered. "But the tension is spreading." I nodded slowly, my mind calculating the unfolding chaos. "Good. Let it grow naturally. Do not authorize any actions. Keep everything paused. The moment of realization must be undeniable." Miranda blinked, then quickly retreated, leaving Thomas and me alone with the quiet building storm. I could feel the anticipation in my chest, that delicious tightening that comes when control and patience intersect. Every moment counted. Every second of hesitation heightened the tension that was slowly infecting the room. Through the partially open door, I could see the staff exchanging nervous glances. One server accidentally knocked over a tray of champagne glasses, and the soft clatter sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. The musicians faltered mid-note, unsure whether to continue without authorization. Guests whispered to one another, some politely pretending to ignore the disruption, others openly exchanging glances of concern. The illusion of perfection was beginning to fracture. Thomas's hand found mine again, his fingers trembling slightly. "She's powerless. Can you believe it?" I shook my head slowly, savoring the feeling. She will believe it soon enough. And then, the humiliation will be complete. Every second she hesitates, every moment she doubts herself. It adds to the lesson she has ignored all these years. From the corridor, Charles Henley appeared, his usual composure wavering. Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. The staff. They refuse to continue without confirmation. Guests are becoming impatient. Some are questioning the bride directly. She is. He swallowed, his eyes searching mine. Distressed. I let a small, satisfied smile tug at the corner of my lips. Exactly as it should be, I said softly. Do not authorize a single action. Let her feel the consequences of her pride and her arrogance. Outside, the faint strains of music faltered. A server, panicked, attempted to place a plate on a table, but the guests noticed the hesitation. Whispered questions became audible murmurs. Some of the younger guests exchanged amused glances, while others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the disruption without fully understanding it. The carefully curated elegance of the day was beginning to crumble in real time. I leaned toward Thomas, letting the weight of authority settle between us. Do you see it? The moment she decided to exclude us, the moment she believed she could erase our contributions, she planted the seeds of this chaos. And now, I let the words linger. She is reaping what she sowed. Thomas swallowed hard, his voice low. She has no idea. She really has no idea. Yes, I whispered, my fingers tightening around the armrest. And that is the beauty of it. She will try to reclaim control, of course, but every hesitant glance, every unanswered question, every pause of service reinforces the lesson. Today is about truth, not appearances. And appearances alone can crumble. From the open door, I glimpsed Vivian herself, radiant in her gown, moving among her guests, smiling tightly, directing staff, but always with that imperceptible tension threading through her expression. She wanted to appear flawless, untouchable, in control. But the tension betrayed her. Her hands, just slightly rigid, her jaw set too tightly, her smile a fraction too strained. Every detail was a silent testament to the fact that she was losing control. I leaned back, letting a subtle thrill pass through me. The chaos, quiet and invisible to her audience, was growing. Guests were beginning to notice. Staff was faltering. The music faltered. And yet, from the outside, everything still looked perfect. That perception, that fragile veneer, was exactly what made the collapse so satisfying. Thomas's hand brushed mine once more. I can't believe how quickly it's unraveling. I let a slow, deliberate smile form. It is unraveling at precisely the right pace. Not too fast to alarm. Not too slow to bore. The tension must grow, thread by thread, until every person present, every guest, every member of her high society circle, feels the reality of the situation. She has built her perfect day on borrowed authority. Today, she will learn it is fragile. A faint clatter echoed from the main hall. I allowed my eyes to follow it. One of the servers had tipped over a tray of desserts, sending a few small cakes rolling to the floor. Guests' murmurs grew louder. Some of the older women exchanged knowing glances, as though recognizing a pattern in the disruption. The younger attendees, initially curious, now whispered with genuine concern. The elegance of the event was fracturing, minute by minute. I pressed my hands together, feeling the anticipation building in my chest. Each pause, each falter, each whispered question was a drumbeat in the symphony of humiliation that was unfolding. Vivian, radiant and flawless, continued to smile, unaware that the carefully constructed world she had claimed as her own was unraveling, thread by thread, in plain sight. And I, her mother, remained the quiet conductor, holding the invisible levers of authority, letting the tension swell, letting the chaos take root, knowing that by the end of the day, she would finally understand the cost of her pride and the consequences of underestimating those who quietly held everything together. The storm had begun. By mid-afternoon, the first real signs of public chaos began to surface. The guests, once murmuring politely, were now exchanging confused glances, their whispers growing louder and more pointed. Plates remained untouched, champagne flutes sat glinting in the sunlight, and servers stood frozen, unsure whether to move forward or wait for instructions. The illusion of perfection was beginning to crumble, and Vivian, radiant in her gown, was oblivious, or perhaps stubbornly determined to maintain her composure. Thomas shifted beside me. his eyes wide as he watched the slow unraveling of her meticulously orchestrated event. "It's amazing," he whispered. "I can't believe she has no idea how powerless she is." I let a small private smile play at the corner of my lips. "She will notice soon enough," I said softly. "And when she does, the embarrassment will be complete. Every guest will witness the consequences of her arrogance, and there will be no way to recover the moment she realizes she cannot control what she thought was entirely hers." From the lounge, I could hear the faint hum of a voice, Vivian, directing the staff herself. She gestured, her tone sharp, attempting to impose order. "Please, just serve the appetizers," she said, her smile taut. "Everything must be perfect. Guests are waiting." But the staff froze, glancing at each other uncertainly, as if waiting for divine approval. Every move they made was hesitant, constrained by the authority I had quietly withheld. The subtle ripple of confusion spread quickly through the hall, and soon, even the most oblivious guests began to notice. A server, nervous and flustered, accidentally knocked over a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Small bites of smoked salmon and miniature quiches clattered onto the floor. Gasps echoed through the room. Eyes turned toward the head table, searching for explanations. Vivian's smile faltered for the first time, her hands tightening around the edge of her gown as she tried to regain composure. Thomas leaned closer, a mix of awe and satisfaction in his voice. "She looks panicked." I nodded, feeling a surge of controlled excitement. "Not yet fully," I whispered. "Patience. The true humiliation comes gradually. Every falter, every mistake. It amplifies the lesson. She must see it unfold before her eyes." Outside the lounge, a few guests had begun whispering among themselves. "Didn't they say the food would be ready by now?" one asked, voice tinged with unease. Another shook her head, glancing toward the musicians, who were hesitating mid-note. The subtle tension was growing, weaving through the crowd like an invisible thread. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Vivian taking a deep breath, attempting to maintain her radiant composure. She moved from table to table, nodding and smiling, issuing quiet instructions to the staff. But her voice carried a tremor, almost imperceptible, betraying the control she thought she had. A soft knock at the lounge door heralded the arrival of Charles Henley, the venue director. His face was drawn, composure slipping slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, the staff." His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "They refuse to continue without explicit confirmation. Guests are becoming uneasy. Some are asking questions directly. The bride, she's trying to assert control, but they're hesitant, and the tension is spreading." I pressed my lips together in satisfaction. "Exactly as it should be," I said softly. "Do not authorize a single action. Let her feel the consequences of her arrogance. Let the chaos grow naturally." Charles blinked in comprehension, then retreated, leaving us in quiet anticipation. The tension outside thickened with each passing second. Small mishaps continued. A champagne flute tilted too far and spilled, a centerpiece slightly shifted, and the music faltered mid-piece. Every imperfection, subtle though it was, became magnified in the eyes of the guests, who were beginning to grasp that something was amiss. Thomas shook his head, incredulous. "It's unfolding so fast. It's beautiful in a way." I allowed a slow, deliberate smile. "It is justice, Thomas. She built her day on borrowed authority, on appearances without substance. And now the truth is manifesting. She cannot hide, she cannot repair, and she cannot control. Every misstep, every falter, is a reflection of the choices she made long before today." Through the slightly ajar door, I saw Vivian attempting to guide a waiter with a tray of drinks. Her instructions were precise, her gestures exaggerated, her smile tight. Yet the tray trembled in the server's hands, and several drinks spilled, drawing sharp gasps from nearby guests. Her eyes flickered toward me briefly, as if searching for reassurance, but I did not move. She understood nothing yet. I leaned back in my chair, letting the subtle thrill of control wash over me. Each second of hesitation, every ripple of confusion, every small falter of service, was a reminder that the day she thought she ruled entirely was dependent entirely on us. And now, quietly, invisibly, I was reclaiming that control. The storm had begun, and there would be no turning back. By mid-evening, the carefully constructed illusion of Vivian's wedding had begun to crumble entirely. What had started as subtle hesitation among the staff had grown into full-blown confusion, spreading through the hall like wildfire. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispering to one another with voices just loud enough to carry, yet not loud enough to draw direct attention. Some attempted polite smiles, masking their surprise, while others openly glanced around, searching for explanations. Thomas leaned toward me, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I've never seen her like this," he whispered. "She looks helpless." I allowed a slow, deliberate smile to form. "Helpless is exactly right," I said softly. "She believed she could erase us, control everything herself, and stand above the people who built this day. Now, she is learning that perfection depends on unseen foundations." The faint strains of music faltered as the orchestra, unsure how to proceed without confirmation from management, paused mid-performance. Guests began to notice, their murmurs growing in confidence. One of the younger women whispered sharply to her companion, nodding toward the head table. "Isn't this strange? Everything was supposed to be perfect by now." Another table echoed the sentiment. "I thought they said the appetizers were ready," a man muttered. "Why is everything at a standstill?" From the lounge, Miranda appeared once more, her usually precise demeanor fraying at the edges. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sir." "The bride is panicking. She is moving from table to table, trying to restore order. Guests are asking direct questions, some even expressing frustration." Her voice faltered as she glanced toward the door. She's losing control." I let a quiet, satisfied smile spread across my face. "Perfect," I whispered. "Do not authorize a single thing. Let her feel every second of the consequences she has ignored for so long. Every hesitation, every falter, every uncomfortable glance from a guest. It is her lesson, delivered flawlessly." Outside, the faint glimmer of crystal chandeliers reflected the tension growing in the hall. A server, nervous and hesitant, tipped over a tray of drinks, sending glasses clattering to the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Vivian's smile faltered for the first time that I had seen, her hands tightening around her gown as she tried to regain composure. She gestured to the staff, her instructions sharp and precise, yet ignored. The faltering, uncertain movements of the servers only amplified the embarrassment. Thomas swallowed hard. "She looks panicked. This is extraordinary." "Yes," I said softly, my fingers clasped tightly. "This is the moment she begins to understand that appearances mean nothing without authority, without control, without the people who quietly build the world around her. Today, she is experiencing the cost of pride, the consequences of exclusion." From the corridor, Charles Henley appeared, his face tight with unease. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Whitmore." The staff refuses to continue without confirmation. "The bride, she's trying to direct them herself, but," he swallowed, his voice low. "They're hesitant. Guests are noticing. Some are openly questioning her authority. The tension is growing." I allowed myself a subtle triumphant smile. "Exactly as it should be," I said. "Let her feel it fully. Every question, every falter, every anxious glance. Let them build the crescendo. She must see before the day is over that her perfection is dependent entirely on others." Thomas's hand brushed mine. "It's like watching a storm unfold," he whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice soft but steady. "A storm she summoned herself by believing she could stand above those who quietly hold everything together. This is not revenge. It is revelation." The chaos spread further. A young musician's bow slipped mid-performance, producing a sharp, off-key note that made several guests flinch. A server, flustered by repeated questions, dropped a plate of desserts, the contents scattering across the polished marble. Gasps and murmurs rose in volume, and even the most composed guests could no longer hide their confusion. Vivian's face flushed, her hand shaking subtly as she tried to regain control, moving from table to table with forced grace. I watched, my chest tightening with anticipation. Every gesture she made, every attempt at command, failed to restore the fluidity of the day. Her radiant composure, once flawless and untouchable, was unraveling before my eyes. And the guests, her carefully curated audience, were witnessing it all. Thomas exhaled slowly. "She's realizing, isn't she? That she's not in control?" I allowed a faint smile. "She is beginning to see it, yes. But not fully yet. The full lesson, The complete understanding will come with time, when she cannot undo the embarrassment she has created. Outside, I could hear the subtle murmurs of guests shifting from polite concern to outright curiosity. Whispers of what's happening? And is this normal? Threaded through the room, carrying over to the corridors. Even the most polite high society attendees were now exchanging sharp glances, noting the faltering rhythm, the unfinished courses, the abandoned trays. The day's perfection had been interrupted. Vivian, radiant but faltering, attempted once more to direct the staff. Her voice carried through the hall, firm and controlled, yet threaded with tension. Her hands shook slightly, betraying the panic she struggled to suppress. A spilled drink, a tipped tray, a faltering musician. Each misstep amplified the chaos, each whisper, each glance, a reminder of her failing authority. I leaned back, allowing a quiet thrill to pass through me. Every hesitation, every mistake, every ripple of doubt strengthened the lesson she had ignored for so long. She believed she could stand above the people who built her world. Today she was learning that she could not. The storm had fully arrived, and the carefully constructed illusion of perfection was dissolving in real time. The guests, the staff, the musicians, even the bride herself, all were witnesses to the unraveling. And at the center of it, standing radiant yet powerless, Vivian would soon realize the true cost of her arrogance. The day, built on appearances, would end with revelation. And I, her mother, would watch it unfold, quiet, patient, and utterly in control. The air in the grand hall had become electric with tension. The whispers of guests, once polite and subdued, had grown louder, threading through the room like wildfire. Servers froze mid-step, musicians faltered, and plates remained untouched as the chaos escalated. Vivian, radiant in her gown but increasingly tense, moved from table to table, attempting to impose order, but every gesture was met with hesitation, uncertainty, or outright refusal. Her once flawless composure now betrayed her panic. Thomas leaned toward me, eyes wide. "She looks completely defeated," he whispered. I allowed a slow, deliberate smile. "Not yet fully, Thomas," I said softly. "The ultimate moment is still ahead." Every second she hesitates, every misstep, every ripple of confusion adds to the crescendo of her revelation. Miranda appeared at the lounge door, clipboard clutched tightly, her face pale. "Mrs. Whitmore, sir. The bride. She is trying to direct the staff herself, but they're frozen. Guests are openly questioning her authority. Some are frustrated, others are confused, and the tension, it's reaching a peak." I nodded calmly. "Do not authorize a single action. Let the culmination unfold. The full weight of her choices must be visible to everyone." Outside, the hall had descended into near pandemonium. A server tripped over a misplaced chair, sending a tray of champagne glasses crashing to the floor. Gasps and murmurs rose instantly. Another waiter dropped a platter of appetizers. A centerpiece toppled, flowers scattering across the polished marble. Even the musicians paused, unsure whether to continue without confirmation. Vivian's radiant smile faltered. Her hands shook slightly, and her jaw tightened as she tried to regain composure, issuing sharp, precise instructions to the staff. Yet every movement was met with subtle resistance. The elegant event she had envisioned was dissolving before her eyes. Thomas exhaled slowly. "She's realizing she can't fix this. Can't control any of it." "Yes," I murmured. "And soon, the final act will unfold." I stood, walking toward the door, my presence commanding yet quiet. The staff instinctively straightened, waiting for me to speak. Vivian noticed me moving through the room, her eyes widening, a flicker of panic crossing her face. She attempted a radiant smile, but it faltered under the weight of the situation. I approached the head table, where she stood, radiant yet powerless. "Vivian," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It seems you've forgotten one very important lesson. No celebration, no grandeur, no perfection exists without the people who quietly build it." Her lips parted, trying to respond, but no words came. The staff, obedient to my silent authority, began methodically retracting service. Trays were removed, drinks pulled back, food deliveries cancelled. The musicians lowered their instruments. The hall, once a symphony of elegance, fell silent in a heartbeat. Gasps filled the room. Guests looked around, shocked and confused. Some whispered loudly, others openly stared. The illusion of a flawless, radiant wedding had been shattered in a single moment. Vivian's radiant composure crumbled entirely. Her hands trembled as she clutched her gown. Her eyes darted around, desperately seeking someone to help, to restore order. But everyone in the room now understood what she had ignored. She had relied on borrowed authority, appearances, and exclusion. Her parents, Thomas and I, had quietly controlled the entire foundation of this day. And now the facade was gone. Thomas's hand brushed mine. "She's completely humiliated," he whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "And this is the culmination of every choice she made." Guests murmured openly, some approaching Vivian with awkward questions. "Is this how it's supposed to be?" one asked, voice trembling between shock and curiosity. Others whispered to each other, noting the failure of service, the tipped trays, the abandoned music, the disarray of flowers and decor. The spectacle she had planned to impress had collapsed entirely, and she had no one to blame but herself. Vivian's shoulders shook. Her radiant gown shimmered under the chandeliers, but it could not mask the reality of her helplessness. The audience she had hoped to dazzle with her elegance now witnessed her vulnerability, her panic, and her loss of control. Every whispered question, every pointed glance, every shocked murmur of the guests hammered home the lesson she had ignored for years. No one stands above those who quietly build their world. I reached her side, voice calm but carrying weight. "The moment you chose to exclude us, to erase us, was the moment your perfect day ended. Today, you learned that beauty and grandeur mean nothing without those who quietly sustain it." She looked at me, eyes wide, breathless, unable to respond. The guests' whispers grew louder, now tinged with understanding and disbelief. The staff paused, frozen yet obedient, reflecting the silent power I had quietly exercised throughout the day. The orchestral music had ceased, replaced by the hum of confused, shocked conversation. I allowed a slow, deliberate smile. The lesson was complete. The storm, quiet yet undeniable, had fully arrived. Vivian, radiant yet powerless, stood at the center of her own unraveling, humiliated in front of the very guest she had hoped to impress. Thomas exhaled softly beside me. "She will never forget this," he whispered. "No," I said quietly, my eyes fixed on her trembling form. "And that is the point." The room fell into an uneasy silence, punctuated only by the soft whispers of shocked guests. The wedding, meant to showcase perfection, had ended in revelation. Vivian had learned, in the most public and undeniable way, that appearances are fragile, authority is earned, and the people you attempt to erase often hold the ultimate power. And as I stood there, watching her realization unfold, I knew that the day's lesson, the most important lesson of her life, would be unforgettable. The silence that followed the collapse of the wedding was heavy, almost suffocating. Guests, once awed by the grandeur, now exchanged bewildered and uneasy glances. A few whispered urgently to their neighbors, their polite masks gone, replaced with genuine confusion and curiosity. The polished marble floors, still scattered with desserts and toppled centerpieces, reflected the flickering chandelier lights in fractured patterns, echoing the fragmented illusion of perfection. Vivian stood at the head table, radiant yet trembling, her once pristine gown slightly smudged from her frantic attempts to salvage the day. Her hands shook as she clutched the edge of the table for support. I watched her, silent, letting the moment stretch, every second magnifying the consequences of her decisions. Thomas leaned close, voice low but tinged with awe. She's realizing everything." "Yes," I whispered. "But the realization is only just beginning. The full weight of the social consequences is about to hit her." The guests began to murmur more openly. "Did the caterer cancel everything?" one asked, eyes wide as she gestured toward the empty buffet tables. "I thought this was supposed to be perfect," another whispered. The atmosphere shifted from polite curiosity to judgment, the social veneer peeling away rapidly. The people Vivian had hoped to impress were now witnesses to her downfall. I took a slow step forward, my presence commanding but quiet. Staff immediately straightened, waiting for instructions, yet still obedient only to me. The orchestra had lowered their instruments, the notes now absent from the whole, leaving only the murmur of astonished conversation. Every falter, every moment of uncertainty, every whispered question reinforced the lesson. Vivian tried to regain composure. "Please, everyone, let's continue," she said, her voice tight. Her hands trembled slightly as she motioned to the servers. But no one moved. Her authority, so carefully assumed, had vanished entirely in a single moment. Thomas exhaled softly beside me. It's like she's seeing the truth for the first time. She can't fix this. I allowed a small, quiet smile. She's beginning to understand that appearances, borrowed authority, and pride are fragile. Every guest here sees what happens when you exclude the people who quietly sustain your world. From the back of the room, a group of older women exchanged pointed glances. Didn't her parents fund this? One whispered, her tone sharp. I heard they paid for everything. And she tried to humiliate them? Another nodded, lips pursed. It's shocking. I can't believe she would do that. Their voices carried just enough for Vivian to hear, and I noticed her shoulders tense further. A server nervously approached, holding a small tray of untouched drinks. Vivian's eyes darted to him, pleading silently, but he froze, looking toward me for confirmation. I gave none. The drinks remained unserved. The guests' murmurs grew louder. Some were whispering openly about the arrogance of the bride. Others questioned how such a meticulously planned event could fall apart so spectacularly. I stepped closer to Vivian, letting my presence be known without a word. Her radiant facade faltered further, her breathing uneven, her eyes wide and searching for support that was no longer available. She had always relied on appearances, on influence, on the impression she made. Today, she faced the stark reality that the foundation she depended on, the people who quietly built the day, could withdraw their support entirely. Thomas's voice trembled with awe. She's humiliated. Socially, everything she wanted to impress is crumbling in front of her. Yes, I murmured softly. And this is the moment that counts. Not just the wedding, but the lesson. Pride, exclusion, arrogance. They have all led to this moment of reckoning. A few guests approached the head table cautiously, curious, some whispering to each other, others staring openly. Vivian's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, the radiant smile she had cultivated now a thin mask stretched over rising panic. The carefully orchestrated image of a perfect bride was gone. Every misstep, every falter, every ripple of chaos reflected her choices. I allowed myself a moment to savor the scene, the culmination of patience, control, and quiet authority. Every second of hesitation, every subtle disruption, had amplified the lesson. Vivian was not just embarrassed. She was confronted with the truth of her arrogance in the most public and undeniable way possible. From the corner of my eye, I noticed the caterer quietly packing up remaining food, the bar staff withdrawing from service, and the musicians gathering their instruments. Each action, executed silently and obediently to my withdrawn authorization, heightened the humiliation. Every guest now understood that the collapse was deliberate, yet the bride's powerlessness made it seem all the more dramatic. Vivian's hands trembled as she adjusted her gown, eyes darting around the hall for assistance, for rescue, for anything that could salvage her day, but there was nothing. The people she had tried to erase, the ones she had believed she could humiliate, had quietly reclaimed control. And in doing so, they had delivered a lesson far more permanent than any reprimand or lecture could provide. Thomas shook his head, awe evident in his voice. She'll never forget this day. No, I said quietly, my gaze unwavering. And that is the point. The guests continued to murmur, some openly discussing the bride's arrogance, others exchanging sympathetic looks toward us, her parents. The chaos had fully revealed the truth. The wedding was not about appearances, but about the foundation of support, respect, and authority that had quietly sustained it. And as I watched Vivian stand at the center of her unraveling, radiant yet powerless, I knew the lesson would linger far beyond this day. Socially, emotionally, and personally, she had been confronted with the consequences of her pride and her choices. The storm of the wedding had passed, leaving only the aftermath, and the indelible mark of humiliation, reckoning, and revelation. The hall had finally quieted, though the echoes of chaos still lingered in every corner. Guests milled about in small groups, whispering and exchanging pointed glances. Some left quietly, still murmuring in disbelief. Others lingered, speaking in hushed tones about the spectacle they had witnessed. And at the center of it all stood Vivian, radiant in her gown, yet utterly defeated, her composure shattered, her eyes wide and searching. I approached her slowly, letting each step carry the weight of authority and patience. Thomas followed, silent, his presence calm and steady. The staff moved obediently around us, responding to my subtle gestures alone, their quiet efficiency a sharp contrast to the confusion that had reigned moments before. Vivian's lips parted, as if to speak, But no words came. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the head table, and her eyes, once filled with arrogance and determination, now flickered with something else, realization. I knelt slightly to meet her gaze, letting my voice carry softly but firmly. Vivian. Do you understand now? Her eyes darted between me and Thomas, searching for reassurance, for an excuse, for a lifeline. But there was none. She began, voice trembling. I thought. I shook my head gently, letting silence fill the space. You thought you could erase us, exclude us, and create perfection on your own terms. But perfection depends on those who quietly sustain it. Today, you learned the cost of arrogance, of exclusion, and of pride. She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes, the radiant mask she had worn all day slipping entirely. The whispers of the guests, now soft but omnipresent, reminded her of the public nature of her humiliation. Every misstep, every falter, every spilled tray had been witnessed. Every person she had sought to impress now understood the truth. Thomas's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. She sees it, he whispered. Yes, I said softly. But she must live with it, feel it, and understand it fully. Vivian's shoulders slumped. Her radiant gown shimmered under the chandelier lights, but the elegance meant nothing now. Her eyes, wide and tearful, reflected the weight of the lesson she had ignored for years. She had built her day on appearances and borrowed authority, but now, stripped of her pretense, she was powerless. Guests continued to whisper, some offering awkward words of sympathy, others exchanging knowing glances. The social consequences were visible, undeniable. Vivian's carefully curated image had collapsed entirely, and the world she had hoped to impress now held a clear view of her vulnerabilities. I reached out, placing a gentle hand on her arm. The moment you tried to erase us, the moment you sought to humiliate the people who quietly built this day, you sowed the seeds of this outcome. Today, you have learned that respect and humility are earned, not assumed. That authority is not borrowed, it is held by those who quietly sustain it. She looked down, voice barely a whisper. I understand now. Yes, I said softly. And that understanding, though painful, is the only true gift this day can offer. Pride and arrogance can build illusions, but only humility, respect, and acknowledgement sustain reality. Thomas nodded, silent, watching as the lesson settled. The staff, still quiet and obedient, moved efficiently around the hall, restoring order where possible, yet the memory of the chaos remained indelible. The guests, once captivated by glamour and expectation, now understood the fragility of appearances and the power of unseen foundations. I stepped back, letting the moment linger. Vivian's humiliation, though public and sharp, carried a deeper truth, one she would carry with her far beyond this day. The consequences of her choices, the cost of exclusion, and the reality of dependency were now inescapable. In the quiet aftermath, as the remaining guests departed and the staff began tidying the hall, I stood beside Thomas, watching our daughter absorb the full weight of the lesson. She had learned at last the meaning of respect, authority, and the invisible hands that sustain life's grandest moments. And though the wedding had ended in chaos, though the public humiliation had been complete, the day had also delivered clarity, reflection, and understanding. She would never forget. I looked around the hall one final time, the scattered desserts, toppled flowers, and abandoned champagne flutes reflecting the fragility of appearances. I turned to Thomas, voice soft but resolute. This is the legacy of patience, control, and quiet authority. She now knows what it truly means to stand in the center of her choices. Thomas nodded, eyes solemn. And she will carry it for the rest of her life. I allowed myself a small private smile. The storm of the day finally settled, the lesson fully delivered. The wedding, once meant to be a display of grandeur and pride, had become a testament to humility, respect, and the power of those who quietly build the world. Vivian, radiant yet humbled, would carry the memory of this day forever. And I, her mother, had ensured that the truth had been revealed, publicly, undeniably, and with perfect clarity. The day ended not in celebration, but in revelation. And that was the greatest gift of all. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.